Welcome back, guys. Today we are joined by Toby Parnell, who is the managing partner at Magico. So welcome to the podcast, Toby. Maybe you can start by telling us a bit about yourself and what you guys do at Magico.
Morning, Jordan. Thanks for having me. Yeah, absolutely. So Magico is a group of engineers, and we work with manufacturers in the UK to deliver performance improvement and ultimately save money for our clients.
Okay, cool. And you have been at the company for quite a while now. What has been some of the stories that you can share with us about growing inside a company like this?
So I set Magico up 7 years ago. I left my previous employer in 2019, took a bit of a leap of faith. I had no real plan of where we were going or how we were going to get there, but it's really grown organically. And the real catalyst for that is just delivering fantastic results for our clients. So our first client was a company called Button Up Box, and we helped solve one of their biggest issues, which was causing them to lose roughly 10% of their output, adding significant amount of cost into the business with extra waste, avoidable waste. And we spent 6 months solving that problem to root cause. And really from that, our ethos is really about delivering brilliant results that leave sustainable long-term value for our clients. And through that, we've grown quite organically. We're now a team of 12. And I'm sure you're aware, a lot of the work that we're now doing has come through off the back of relationships we've built along the way and through referrals and recommendations. So yeah, it's been a really exciting journey. We're really enjoying it, creating a place where people really enjoy working and are doing meaningful work that adds real value to our clients. So yeah, it's been great. And now we're in a position to actually start thinking a bit more seriously about where we want to go in the next 5 to 10 years. So starting with no real plan, it's becoming clearer what the vision is, and yeah, it's been a great few years.
Awesome. And so would you mind sharing what that vision looks like over the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years?
So I think last strategy day we got together and said what would good look like for the next 3 years, and the goal really is to get to about 30 people. Turnover in the region of sort of 10 to 12 million GBP a year.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, that it's a place where people can see themselves spending 10, 15 years of their career and really delivering great work, great results, and becoming an expert in the science of performance improvement in manufacturing, and really delivering huge amounts of value to our client and helping them on their journey of continuous improvement and solving technical issues that prevent them from being more profitable than they are currently.
Okay, I love that. And so I would be remiss if I didn't ask about AI. Like how are you seeing AI currently? Are you guys integrating it into what you're doing? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think a bit like automation in factories, it's a bit of a buzzword,
Yeah.
and it's a real opportunity to be harnessed. So I think if it's used in the right way, it can really amplify the impact you can have. But I think we just need to be mindful that it isn't the be all and end all. The work we do is ultimately human. At the end of the day, we change the way people think, the way they behave, the way they act, the way they perform in their businesses. And AI can only get you so far. So I think we are thinking of it as a force multiplier. It makes us quicker because we don't have to do a lot of the mandrolic work, building slides or, writing long bits of text. But ultimately, it can't replace the thinking because that's where we add the value. It can't replace the human interaction. I just see it as a way that frees up time for us to spend more time doing stuff that actually makes a difference. The other part that we're quite excited about is ability to share knowledge quickly between all of the members of the team. So 3 or 4 subject matter experts. James is an expert in optimizing stock level to, maximize service level for the minimum amount of working capital. And Sam is expert in deciding how to plan your factory labor to maximize productivity and so on and so forth. So it's offering a way for us to capture their knowledge and share it seamlessly across the team through accessing a knowledge base with an AI layer on top. So it's really exciting. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity, but my sense is we shouldn't get too distracted by it because ultimately the way that we make an impact is by helping people change. And that just requires time on the line in the factory, talking to the leaders, helping them understand why they need to do things differently and how to do that and helping them see the impact of that. That's where we need to remain our focus. And I don't think robots or AI will ever replace that.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree with everything there. And so, Toby, who is usually the person that gets the very best results from what you guys doing?
Good question. People with an open mind, a level of humility that they can be helped, a level of want that they want to be helped, and a clear need. We talk about there needing to be a burning platform. So what's the burning platform in your business for change? Are you losing money? are your costs too high? Are you missing sales that you otherwise would be gaining, generating margin from if you could produce more? Do you want to not spend significantly more capex in your factory? So there has to be a burning platform, and ultimately, the most senior team in the business need and want us to be there. If those conditions are in place, and they have an openness to be challenged, an open mind to learn new ways of working and understand how we can help them, that's when the conditions are set for us to really make a massive impact very quickly.
Mm,
And so when we work with clients like that, we enjoy it more because our advice and guidance is well received, and you can see the immediate impact it has. And to flip the question, that the most difficult projects are when people are resistant and they maybe don't think that we're needed, or perhaps they see us being there as a affront to their own capability or ego.
yeah.
So the job of the leadership within the business getting consultants in is to make sure that the team understand why they're here, why consultants are here, what we're there to help with, and what we're not there to do. Certainly is to show people up or make them feel like they couldn't perhaps do this themselves, and we are actually here to help accelerate things and maybe teach them slightly different ways of thinking about problem solving, or some of the technical concepts that we're able to bring based on our experience of working across hundreds of different factories doing lots of different things. There is an opportunity to learn. So I'd say the conditions for success: burning platform, openness to learn new ideas, and a level of humility to really get the most out of it.
Okay. And so you mentioned like solving problems. Obviously, like that's what you get paid to do. It's what I get paid to do. And sometimes there's some pushback from people when we come in to solve these problems. Like you mentioned, what do you think have been some of the most interesting solutions that you've been able to deploy that you're looking back and you're like, I would have never have guessed that this would have been the solution, but here we are.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the solutions that we end up implementing in retrospect seem really obvious and not that clever, if you like. And I
Yeah.
think the clever part is being able to pinpoint the specific thing that is wrong and fix it, not necessarily the fix itself. So I'll give you an example. We were working with a luxury dessert manufacturer in the UK, and their problem was that they couldn't control the weight of the dessert going to these glass ramekins. People in the UK will probably know which ones I'm talking about because the glass ramekins are very famous. And they tried everything to solve this problem, and the result was if the product weight at the end of the line is too variable, you have to overfill the average to make sure that the ones with the lowest amount of weight aren't underweight. So they were giving away about £500,000 worth of ingredients a year. Through a series of sort of systematic investigation, we were able to isolate the problem down to an O-ring within a piston that had worn by about zero point 0.1 of a millimeter. And so you had a trough of like chocolate ganache sitting above the filling station. And when the machine was stationary, the hydrostatic pressure from the ganache in the trough was pushing chocolate through the piston even when it wasn't activated. And that was leading sort of 2 or 3 or 4 drops of extra product going into the pot when it shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
That was hidden underneath the filling station, so you couldn't actually see it. So we had to get some cameras in to see the drips, and then we had to do a systematic breakdown of the machine to isolate the specific part that was not to standard. And we replaced the pistons, and it solved the problem instantaneously. Now, you could argue that the engineering team should have been doing the necessary repairs and maintenance procedure on that machine, and that problem wouldn't have been there. However, there's 10,000 things that they have to do in the factory.
Mm,
So again, it's the ability to pinpoint the specific root cause and solve it. Um, that is where the real value gets added. Another example, we were working with a popcorn. They make popcorn, bagged popcorn, and they'd commissioned this plant to be able to do about 60 tons a week, and it was currently performing about 23. I think the numbers. So they were just under half of their theoretical capacity, and it was taking about 8 minutes to pop a big kettle of popcorn. It was sort of 3 kilos of corn goes in with some oil, and they heat it and stir it, and it pops. And about 85% of the corn was popping in about 8 minutes. If you work from first principles, it should take about 2 minutes to pop
mm,
popcorn. If you get a pan on your gas hob at home and you just whack it up to high, stick some corn in, it will pop within 2 minutes. There's something fundamentally going wrong. So again, using variable analysis, we were able to isolate the temperature being the big challenge. So the corn wasn't getting hot enough and it wasn't being stirred in the right way. And we isolated the problem as the thermocouple in the oven itself was right next to the heating element. And that was about 3 inches away from the top of the kettle. So there was sort of 3 inches of aluminium the heat was traveling through. And so the temperature on the surface of the kettle was 40 degrees less than the readout on the dial. So the setting was right, it was on 240
yeah.
degrees, but on the surface of the kettle, it was only say 190, and that wasn't sufficient to get the corn to temperature quickly enough. So you just turn the temperature up 40 degrees and got the got the got the pop time down to about 3.5 minutes, which more than doubled the output. So, again, super simple solution. Turn it up a bit, and stir it faster. But the point is, how did we find that thing out of? And I think the example is the engineering and operations team had done a problem solving exercise, like a brainstorm, and they'd written down 100 variables which they wanted to check. So that could have taken 2 years, and they might not have found the answer. So again, it's the systematic method we use to isolate the specific things wrong. The actual solution often isn't that interesting or sexy. It's just we have a bit of a joke internally. It's like, are we just going to heat it up or stir it a bit faster? Because that's been the solution for the last 2 or 3 clients. But I think that's more coincidence than anything else systematic that's going wrong. But yeah, as I say, solution not that interesting. It's the way we get there that's the really cool part.
That is fascinating. I feel like if I was smarter, I'd love to be like involved in a process like that. It sounds like an enormously fun puzzle every time being presented to me, and I'm like, okay, how are we going to figure it out today? I guess there's a little bit of that when I come into a business and it's like, okay, well, what are we doing? How come we're not growing? I guess it's similar, but it's less like first principles physics, and it's more. Well, I guess it's still always first principles, right? I'm a big fan of that type of thinking. That is fascinating, Toby. You wouldn't happen to have another interesting anecdote? I mean, make a great clip.
Yeah, the first one we solved was for a butternut box. So the process is they take really nice cuts of pork, lamb, beef, grind it up with vegetables, and they place it into plastic pouches. And ultimately, it gets cooked and sold for dog food. So it's sort of really healthy dog food that helps dogs improve their gut health and stops them farting, basically. Two guys set it up, Kevin, Dave, super good guys, and they were having a problem where 1 in 10 of these pouches they were making were popping during the cooking process. So you put the meat in and you welded the pouch shut with a heat weld, put it into a steam oven, heat it up, and then it was popping in the oven. So they were losing 10%, causing loads of problems because they didn't have to clean the ovens. Obviously, 10% of your raw material costs was wasted, and they were losing 10% of their output. And the focus had been the way they were working around this in the short term was these bags were vacuum drawn. So you'd heat the film up and you'd apply sort of pressure and suck the bottom of these pouches out to create the volume for the meat to go in. And the way they got around the popping was they'd just make these bags bigger and bigger and bigger. So the film was thinner and thinner and thinner, and it was quite flimsy. And then once it was cooked and the air had stopped expanding, once it cooled down, it looked not very aesthetically pleasing because all the loose film was there. So they didn't want that to be the way that they carried on solving the issues. The thinking at the time was it was the weld that was breaking. So you heat these sandwiches, 2 bits of plastic film together, and you heat them up and they weld together, so they melt together. And a lot of focus had been put on the weld. So they'd tried heating the weld up. They'd been tried holding it down for longer. And what I did was take the pouches, put them in a water bath, heat them up, and filmed them in slow motion. And I was able to see that as they were failing, I could see these tiny bubbles coming out at the weld. So it looked like they were onto the right thing. But then when I took it under the microscope afterwards and actually saw that where it failed, the weld was still intact, but the film was like a 7-layer laminate of polyamide polyethylene, and it was delaminating on like the 3rd layer down. So the film was actually ripping apart, not the weld breaking. So making the weld stronger wouldn't have solved the issue. We just had to find a way of reducing the pressure. So what we then looked at was, what are the factors which lead to the pressure increasing the bag? It's obviously the temperature, the amount of air and the volume, and the amount of stretch in the film. So the more stretch there is, the bigger the pouch, the less the pressure increases because it's offset by the increased volume. The other way you can affect that is the surface area to volume ratio of the pouches themselves. So if you take a cube, it's got a very low surface area to volume ratio. And as you flatten that down in the limit of a thin piece of paper with no thickness, you've got an infinite surface area to volume ratio. So somewhere in between, there's an optimum which gives you enough skin to offset the pressure as it stretches without it looking like a piece of paper. Interestingly, you don't need much of a flattening to a cube to get you a lot more skin. So we tested around to find the optimum ratio, designed a new pouch, found a provider that could make those formers, the pouch former, and found a new filling machine that provided a better presentation of the material, implemented it, and the problem went to completely eliminated. So they've been using that solution since 2020 in their old site. And then as they commissioned a new factory in Doncaster, they actually implemented that solution there. So that was at the time saving them, I think, sort of couple of £1 million a year. They've now grown, 5 to 10x. So it's now saving 10, 15 million pounds a year, both in terms of raw materials and capacity. So that was a really cool one. And ultimately, the impact that had on the guys in terms of seeing that first principles thinking, whenever any of their friends or any of their contemporaries have an issue, we're the first people they think of because they've seen the capability that we able to deploy in their factory. The on-site teams tend not to have that level of first principles approach, probably
Mm.
because it takes a huge amount of time and they've got another job to do. But I definitely think having sort of an engineering background and the structured thinking really helps to ensure that we can continue to find the specific issues.
Again, fascinating. It reminds me of there was a TV show based on a guy's life. I think it's like the second highest IQ ever recorded, or maybe the first. And he started a consulting
Mhm.
agency where he just solve billionaire people's problems. So, for example, there was a billionaire's son is in love with some girl, and the father doesn't like it, and he doesn't want to intervene. Like, how do you break them up? And they socially engineer this unbelievably complex dynamic to prove to the guy that she's a gold digger through planting all these different people and like completely taking over a coffee shop and crazy stuff they used to do. But it reminds me of something like that where you go,
Sounds quite.
okay, yeah, super elaborate, very complex engineering problems, but just, different. Awesome, Toby. So coming to some of the marketing side of things, obviously that's what we do here at Dopamine Digital. Like, how are you guys currently approaching client acquisition? You mentioned referrals. How else?
Well, our main methods main is referrals. Doing a great job on site, we build up a network of people who see the value that we can add, and people move around different companies. And chap we were working with on our last client went to a competitor or a company in an adjacent market, and said to us, "Well, seeing what you guys did for that client, come and help us." So that's one source. We have a couple of senior advisors who are really supportive in terms of introducing us to people within their network. That's a key source of referrals. We do a little bit of LinkedIn stuff, but that's mainly just for fun. We don't really have a strategy there. And yeah, it's all network at the moment. I think buying sort of big ticket consultancy services, it's not. I think it's quite a bespoke thing, and it's not the sort of thing you Google. Consultancy to help me solve technical problem and save me 5% of my turnover. Yeah, main focus on network. Again, in terms of a go-to-market strategy, I'm sure there's stuff we could be doing that's better than we are at the minute. It's just a case of where does that sit in our priority list and how are we going to do it and who's going to do it. At the minute, it's just me doing all of the marketing. It's a case of having the capacity to do that as well.
Yeah, I hear you. So you mentioned you're doing some stuff on LinkedIn, but that's just for fun. What is that kind of stuff you're doing for fun?
Well, Magico sponsors a bike team, so a lot of the stuff we put on is about that side of things in terms of the impact that's having, and so that's sort of just brand awareness, and it might not necessarily be reaching the right people, but there's millions of eyeballs seeing this team because they're one of the elite junior teams in the UK, feeding into Ineos, so it's some good exposure, and it's just a good thing to do. I'm really passionate about cycling, so that's a bit of a passion project. We just do as well. We just do thought pieces. So, what do we think about certain situations? What do we think about the market? What do we think about delivering efficiency? Where do we see other commentators on LinkedIn maybe giving advice that doesn't quite align with our methodology and therefore could potentially harm clients if they were to follow it? So, sort of
Hmm.
highlighting potential pitfalls and traps of other methodologies, sharing results of the work we've done, case studies and things like that, and just being generally active and commenting on different people's things that we support. There's no real strategy at the moment. It's just doing stuff at the right time when it feels right. And so it's more of a fun endeavor rather than something that's well thought through.
Okay, got it. That sounds interesting about the cycling. I'll have to have a look at that.
Mhm.
In the interest of time here, Toby, let me sort of jump to one of my favorite questions that I always ask sort of towards the end, and I'm surprised by the answers I get quite often. So let's say, for example, that we had a magic wand that we could wave over one big problem right now that maybe you guys are facing at Magico, and we could solve it just like that. What would that big problem be?
Question, what would it be? I mean, ultimately, it would be fantastic if there was a queue of people waiting to work with us and a queue of qualified people wanting to join us. That would be the two best things that I could hope for. But I think more realistically, I think what would be great is if more of the people that we would like to work with at some point were aware of who we are and how we could help them. Because I think the challenge with that is there's a lot of consultancies out there they all end up being part of this amorphous blob of consultancy. A lot of people don't think fondly of consultancy because not every consultant adds the same level of value. And a lot of people have had bad experiences. So the water gets muddied. And I think a lot of people are able to talk quite generically about similar stuff that we talk about, but don't necessarily do the same thing to the same level or standard and deliver the same results. So being able to differentiate yourselves and have someone in, who could potentially be a client of ours, genuinely understand the differentiators that we have and the value that we could add would be great. So if you have any ideas on how we could do that, I'd be keen to hear. But I think it's a long-term thing, right? It's not the sort of thing we can fix overnight, and it's going to take lots of proof points and several years of education to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, you're very right. It's both of those things. And I mean, we can chat more after this, but yeah, it's essentially it's this coming back to this awareness pyramid where you've got clients that don't know that they have a problem, or you've got clients that or prospects that know that they have a problem and they don't know your solution exists, or they know a solution exists, they just don't know why yours is the best or the best fit for them. And like you mentioned, the best way of showing that is with proof. I mean, I found content to be a fantastic way of educating these people and moving them up the awareness pyramid. And so that's kind of like what we do and what we build. Anyway, we can talk about that later. Toby, a fascinating conversation. I'd love to talk for another 30 minutes and hear about all the engineering solutions that you're able to implement and all the interesting things that you found. You're pinging, I'm pinging. So if people are listening and they want to maybe connect with you or they want to check out what you guys are doing at Magico, where can they go and how can they connect?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Toby Parnell. They can email me on toby@magico.co, and our website is magico.co as well. So that's fairly straightforward. And just sort of, if you're listening and you're running a FMCG or high volume manufacturing site turning over between 50 and half a billion, 50 million and half a billion, and you have a problem that you need some help with, very happy to have a conversation and see if we can help.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on and sharing some things that I have never heard before. So I'm always excited to hear those things. And thank you guys very much for watching. We will see you in the next episode.
Cheers, Jordan. Thanks.